Hey everybody, and welcome to the 5 Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Rory Monahan. Coming up on this week's episode, February Windows Update is causing File Explorer issues. Also, an AppV client executable is being leveraged by a Chinese cyber gang in attacks. And Mozilla decides to renew support for Windows 7. For this and more, keep listening to this episode of the podcast, which of course, as always, is brought to you by my sponsors. And that includes Numescent, the inventors of the first and only cloud-native container management platform for Windows desktops, and also brought to you by Master Packager, who make an application packaging software that helps you build packages that end users love, enterprises want, and the Windows OS needs. If you enjoy the show each week, you have these awesome sponsors to thank. I will cite laptopmag.com for this first story, though I first saw reports of it via the Patch Management Mail group. And that is a recent Windows update KB 5051987 for Windows 11 is reportedly causing instability issues in File Explorer, with some reporting that File Explorer hangs but without throwing the usual not responding errors. People are experiencing that Explorer won't open when trying to navigate to some of the options in the sidebar are via desktop shortcuts on Windows 11 24H2. Which folders are affected varies from user to user, but commonly used main folders like Documents are among the most widely reported, with downloads and pictures also being effectively unreachable for others. And this is just one of the issues reported with the most recent Windows updates. There's also been some reports of this same update failing to install for some, which may actually turn out to be a good thing, I guess. There's also been some early indications of potential network-related issues from the updates, but it's hard to distinguish if these network issues are new because for several months there has been reports of network issues on Windows 11 24H2 anyways. And there's also been some suggestions that those network issues are experienced in particular on Dell and Lenovo machines. If you do run into the File Explorer instability issues, it does appear that you're able to uninstall or roll back this Windows update, so that may be your course of action for now. Last year, Microsoft put a block on upgrades to Windows 11 24H2 on ASUS X415KA and X515KA laptop models due to an issue detected where the machines were likely to blue screen of death on the latest operating system. But it has now been announced that a BIOS update has begun to roll out to alleviate the issue and provide Windows 11 24H2 to more of the ASUS laptop models. There's a great article on the newstack.io explaining the challenges of quantum computing and the sheer scale and error handling required, making it almost an insurmountable task. It explains how Microsoft has been funding research for over 2 decades to work on research on particles they believed may have existed, they didn't even know for sure, that could be used for quantum computing. But when they started the research, it was all just this theory. But now through their research and development over those 20 years, they claim they have developed the first topological qubits, which should be both less error-prone and more stable than alternatives. So just this week, Microsoft has announced its first quantum chip, the Majorana 1, in a form factor that can scale up to 1 million qubit quantum processing units, ready to attach to a dilution refrigerator and slot into their Azure data centers. Microsoft's new state of matter promises true quantum computing with 1 million qubits and possibly by 2033. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella commented on the announcement and the development on Twitter, saying, quote, "A couple of reflections on the quantum computing breakthrough we just announced. Most of us grew up learning there are 3 main types of matter that matter: solid, liquid, and gas. Today that changed. After a nearly 20-year pursuit, we've created an entirely new state of matter, unlocked by a new class of materials, topoconductors, that enable a fundamental leap in computing. It powers Majorana 1, the first quantum processing unit built on a topological core. We believe this breakthrough will allow us to create a truly meaningful quantum computer, not in decades as some have predicted, but in years. The qubits created with topoconductors are faster, more reliable, and smaller. They are 1/100th of a millimeter meaning we now have a clear path to a million qubit processor. Imagine a chip that can fit in the palm of your hand, yet is capable of solving problems that even all the computers on Earth today combined could not. Sometimes researchers have to work on things for decades to make progress possible. It takes patience and persistence to have big impact in the world. And I am glad we get the opportunity to do just that at Microsoft. This is our focus. When productivity rises, economies grow faster, benefiting every sector in every corner of the globe. It's not about hyping tech, it's about building technology that truly serves the world. End quote. So yeah, a seriously emphatic statement by Satya Nadella there, and certainly the mainstream media that covers tech has been lauding this announcement as revolutionary. Now, 2033 is still some years away, so it's probably going to be a while until the impact of this is felt. An architect of EU copyright law has said legislation is needed to protect writers, musicians, and creatives left exposed by an irresponsible legal gap in the EU's Artificial Intelligence Act. The warning has been sounded that draft rules to implement the AI Act were taking several steps backwards on copyright, while one writer spoke of a devastating loophole where the EU 2019 copyright directive that's already in effect does not cover creations of Gen AI, and the AI Act itself states that tech firms must comply with the 2019 copyright law that does not cover for Gen AI created content. And there's an exemption for text and data mining. So it essentially reads like they're just turning a blind eye on plagiarism by these Gen AI companies. And it's probably by design, quite frankly, because, I mean, if you read the news and you follow the whole AI thing, you'll see that like there's suggestions that, oh, well, China's making big waves, the US is making big waves, but Europe is kind of in a lull in the middle and left completely behind. So there are suggestions that regulations within the European Union are holding Europe back for technological developments like this. So it could be by design that they bring in this chip act that kind of is a front to say, well, we're going to protect our citizens, but really, once you read through the lines, it's not doing a whole lot, and they're leaving massive gaps to allow these Gen AI companies to essentially plagiarize other people's work. Is it the right move or not? I guess if you believe that AI is going to be all-encompassing and take over the world, then it probably is the right move, because Europe is going to be left behind in the dust if they don't allow it. But at the same time, it also probably means that there's no international regulators with their hands on the wheel. Google's image recognition product Lens has been updated with 2 new features. Users now get a Lens option while they browse the web on their iPhone through the Google app or the Chrome browser. Google is also expanding its AI overviews to appear more often in its Lens results, with no need to add a question to your visual search. For instance, when you tap the camera icon in the search bar to click a photo with Lens, an AI overview will show up to describe what you're looking at, along with links to resources. And yeah, like Lens has been around for many years now, but it often goes overlooked in discussions of AI. But it's maybe because it's been before Gen AI kind of took the focus. But if you haven't used Google Lens, it's incredible technology. You should take a look, and it is available on iPhones and iOS. And it's good to see that they're also bringing advancements and new features to the iPhone, not just to the Android. Mozilla have announced they plan to continue to update and maintain Firefox's extended support release version 115 on Windows 7 and Windows 8.1 and macOS 10.12 through 10.14 up to and including September 2025. They said they will reassess their plans going forward in August. But yeah, Mozilla hanging in there and supporting those stalwarts who are still on Windows 7. WindowsCentral.com has reported that a recent update to Edge improves the speed of opening the Downloads folder, drop history, and the In Private New tab experience. Favorites and Browser Essentials are also reportedly quicker after the jump to Microsoft Edge version 132. Several parts of Edge are on average 40% faster than they were before. As a quick note, Edge is actually up to version 133 at the time of this recording, but the speed improvement started to roll out in the earlier version of 132. And it will reportedly reduce the time it takes to open the download folder from about 0.927 seconds to 0.428 seconds. It might be negligible for you as an experience, like you may not even notice it, but I mean, that's twice as quick pretty much. The performance boost comes courtesy of Microsoft's Edge migration to use the WebUI version 2 framework. I saw an interesting article by bleepycomputer.com this week who reported that a Chinese cyber gang has started to exploit AppV through a vulnerability that has been known since 2022. For the exploit, the mavinject.exe is abused to inject malicious payloads into a waitfor.exe, which is a legitimate Windows utility that comes pre-installed in the Windows OS. The legitimate function of waitfor.exe on Windows is to synchronize processes across multiple machines by waiting for a signal or command before executing a specific action. And it's used primarily in batch scripting and automation for delaying tasks or ensuring that specific processes finish before others can start. Being a trusted system process, the malware that is injected passes as a normal Windows process, and the article suggests so ESET and potentially other antivirus does not flag the malware's execution. Now, the kind of name drop of ESET did not go unnoticed by them, and in a fun wrinkle, they called out the researchers who disclosed the attacks, who happened to be one of their competitors, Trend Micro, and have stated that they do in fact flag the execution and said they were, quote, bemused that Trend Micro did not alert ESET to discuss their findings, end quote. In the article, bleepcomputer.com warned that the executable should be blocked on devices not utilizing AppV. So yeah, I mean, if you utilize AppV, that executable is required. It's part of the client. So I guess you're kind of taking the risk by having that available, but you may not have any other option because if you're still dependent on those AppV applications, you need the client. It'll be interesting to see now that Microsoft has announced that they're no longer deprecating the AppV client and the AppV sequencer. If this is a security issue that's going to be fixed, it kind of sounds like maybe it can't be because it's just operating by design and it's just being leveraged by the cyber gang in this instance. But it's also from 2022, so if it is going to be fixed, clock's ticking. It's already been a couple of years, well, almost 3 years. Google recently announced a Gemini feature that allows users to recall past chats. You can now ask about something you've already discussed with Gemini in the past or ask Gemini to summarize a previous conversation. To use this feature, Gemini will be using your previously stored conversations. However, Google will allow you to review and delete the chat history if you wish. According to neowin.net, you can also decide the duration for which Google can store your chat history. And if you do not want Gemini to store your chats, you can just turn off Gemini apps activity altogether. And another good thing is that Gemini may indicate when it uses your past chats in sources and related content. So obviously the market leader, OpenAI, it does have a memory. It does remember your previous conversations. So you can bring back up past conversations if you like. So this is kind of in line, I guess, with the market leader. Google Chrome's stable releases now feature some AI capabilities to their existing enhanced protection feature. Enhanced protection with AI is turned off by default, but you can turn it on from the settings security option on Windows, Android, and iOS. And they claim that the AI protection performs an in-depth scan for suspicious downloads and can warn about more dangerous sites than ever before as it's constantly learning. OpenAI is reportedly entering its final stages of designing its long-rumored AI processor with the aim of decreasing its dependence on NVIDIA hardware. Ars Technica reports OpenAI plans to send its chip designs to Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Co., or TSMC, for fabrication within the next few months, but the chip has not yet been formally announced. The OpenAI chip's full capabilities, technical details, and exact timeline are still unknown according to Ars Technica, but the company reportedly intends to iterate on the design and improve it over time, giving it leverage in negotiations with chip suppliers and potentially granting the company future independence with the chip design it controls outright. So pretty mind-blowing, but that's the kind of money that they have, that they could be developing their own chip in parallel and possibly just as a means of leverage in negotiations with other suppliers. HP is making waves with the announcement that they are acquiring Humane, a startup behind the AI-powered wearable device known as the AI Pin, for $116 million. Fortune.com reports the deal includes HP taking on most of Humane's employees, its intellectual property, and its software platform, the AI company said on Tuesday. The deal will not include Humane's AI Pin device business, however, which is its flagship and only hardware product. That is going to be shuttered, which is pretty crazy, but I guess that's kind of the value of AI, just IP, and the kind of software and blueprints for some of these AI technologies right now. It's reported the intention is to help integrate AI onto HP computers, printers, and other connected devices. Finally, on the news for this week, in an extensive report published by the BBC, they showed how they analyzed how 4 popular large language models used or abused information from their own BBC articles when answering questions about the news. The results found inaccuracies, misquotes, and/or misrepresentations of BBC content in a significant proportion of the tests, supporting the news organization's conclusion that AI assistants cannot currently be relied upon to provide accurate news, and they risk misleading the audience, according to Ars Technica. In the study, they asked 100 news questions related to trending Google search topics from the last year, such as how many Russians have died in Ukraine, or what is the latest on the independence referendum debate in Scotland? That's a bit of a throwback. These questions were then put to ChatGPT 4o, Microsoft Copilot Pro, Google Gemini Standard, and Perplexity, with the added instruction to use BBC news sources where possible. The 362 responses, excluding situations where an LLM refused to answer, were then reviewed by 45 BBC journalists who were experts on the subjects in question. Those journalists were asked to look for issues in the responses regarding accuracy, impartiality, and editorialization, attribution, clarity, context, and fair representation of the sourced BBC article. 51% of responses were judged to have significant issues in at least one of these areas. Google Gemini fared the worst overall, with significant issues judged in just over 60% of responses, while Perplexity performed best with just over 40% showing such issues. There is a lot more in the study, such as what journalists thought of the responses by the services, kind of how the services handled editorialization, or how they didn't do it, and more. So if you want to see more granular breakdown on thoughts from the output, I'll share a link to this article with this episode, which is episode 374, and you'll find that at 5bytespodcast.com. But now, this episode's scripts, tricks, and tips. Ruben Sprout shared on Blue Sky for those experiencing webcam performance issues such as stuttering when using Google Meet and other applications in Chrome or Edge. Disabling Media Foundation video capture has resolved the issue for him, and you can find that under the flags within Google Chrome if that's the browser you're using. And just try that out if you're having performance issues. Thanks for that tip, Ruben. Also, Adam the Automator shared a blog post on creating a real-world PowerShell module, and it's broken down into multiple parts, but the part that I'll share a link to is essentially working on the functions. So definitely an interesting article and series for those who want to get into building PowerShell modules. Next, World of EUC will be holding an event in Calgary, Alberta, Canada on March 13th, and it looks like it's going to be a pretty cool event, and it has a nice lineup. So if you've got a few hours to spare on March 13th and you want to meet up with the World of EUC, I'll share a link to that event for you. My old buddy Tom Fenton published an article for Stratodesk recently where he featured several from the industry talking about what 2025 would be the year of. So if you're in the end user computing space and you want to see what several people within the space have kind of predicted for the year, you should check out that article. And finally, the webinar that I promoted on here a couple of times over the last 4 weeks or so was on Tuesday. So it is now over, but you could check out the on-demand webinar that featured myself and Jim Moyle talking about app attach in Azure Virtual Desktop and how you can streamline and modernize your application management in Azure Virtual Desktop. And I'll share a link with this episode for that. But that's it for this episode. As always, thank you so much for listening.